Welcome to Daily Living with Father Chapin, where we consider God's Word and how we might be able to apply it into our daily living. Yes, my friend, that is what we do. Sometimes the Bible can be a bit confusing, so we bust it down like a fraction. We're asking questions along the way. Questions like, hey, what do these Gospels have to do with me? That's what I want to know. How can I take these Gospels? They come to me each week and apply them into my daily living so that I can become a reflection of God's love to a world, let's face it, don't know God for sure, and definitely is in deep need of more love, don't you think? I mean, take a look around, my friend. There's a lot of bad news out there. How can I take the good news and apply it into my daily living so that I can become a light in that darkness? I want to be a tool in the hand of God, making present His kingdom. Not someday, but today and every day. And that's what this show is all about. Oh, we got a good one today, hearing from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to the chief priests and the elders of the people, hear another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenants and went on a journey. When vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to obtain his produce. But the tenants seized the servants, and one they beat, another they killed, and a third they stoned. Again, he sent other servants, more numerous than the first ones, but they treated them in the same way. Finally, he sent his son to them, thinking, they will respect my son. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and acquire his inheritance. They seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. What will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes? They answered him, he will put those wretched men to a wretched death and lease his vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at the proper times. Jesus said to them, did you never read the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord this has been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that will produce its fruit. The gospel of the Lord. And what a gospel it is. This is Daily Living. I'm Father Chapin. You stick around. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about this gospel and a few other things here as we consider God's Word and how we might be able to apply it into our daily living. Welcome back to Daily Living. So today we continue our journey through the 21st chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is entering into Jerusalem. He knows that his end is near. After having warned his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer at the hand of the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes, he is now facing the very people that will be the architects of his demise. Now, almost single-handedly, he about causes a riot as he overthrows the money changer tables. And now the religious leadership is confronting him, and they're asking him, by whose authority are you doing these things? In typical rabbinical fashion, he answers their question with another question. He says, okay, I'll answer your question, sure, but answer mine first. By whose authority did John the Baptist do what he did? This, of course, puts them in a pickle, because if they say that John the Baptist was of human origin, the crowds are going to go crazy. I mean, they're going to revolt because they consider John the Baptist as a prophet. But if they say, well, he was of heavenly origin, well, then they're going to have to explain why they didn't listen to him. So they're stuck in a pickle, and what do people do? What do people do when they don't have an answer? Well, they do what any politician would do. They don't answer the question. So Jesus then unleashes the trifecta of three stinging parables, all of which are directed to the religious leadership of Israel. The first being the parable of the two sons, and that was last week. Today, the parable of the vineyard. And then next week, the parable of the wedding feast. So let's talk about our parable today. The parable of the vineyard. Jesus says to the chief priests and the elders of the people, "Hear another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a tower." Now, understand, this would be a story that they would be familiar with. It's a story that any practicing Jew would know well because it echoes Isaiah chapter 5, Psalm of the vineyard, where God creates a vineyard for the people of Jerusalem and the people of Judea. So they would know the story, but you see, here's the deal. In the song of the vineyard, well, they produce bad fruit, and the psalm ends with the vineyard being destroyed. So right away, the people listening would kind of be back on their heels, kind of listening with caution, because the song of the vineyard serves as a warning that if you turn away from God, if you do not revere God, He will remove His grace from you. So, with that in mind, they're standing in the temple of Jerusalem, which is one of the great wonders of the ancient world, an absolute fabulous structure. Something that any practicing Jew would be proud of. Meanwhile, you have the high priests and the elders, and they're running a fine-tuned machine. And I can just see them in my mind's eye. They're standing there with their arms folded, maybe their chin held up a bit. But I don't want to talk about them now. I want to talk about just the folk, the regular people that are on the sidelines, as Jesus is telling this story directed to the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. Let's set the table with a bit of context, because this is important. Okay, Jerusalem is a conquered land, conquered by the Romans, so the promised lands have become the conquered lands, which means that Rome has come in and taken their lands away from them. So their land is now the property of Rome. So what that means is wealthy Romans would own huge tracts of land. And what would they do? Well, they would lease out those stolen lands to have people work the land for their benefit. And to add salt to the wound, making matters worse, they would often lease the lands out to the people who had originally owned the land. I mean, imagine that. You're working land that has been stolen from you for the benefit of the one who took it. Can you see how that might be a bit of a problem? Can you see how there might be a bit resentment here, a bit of tension? So they're working a land that was rightfully their own, and now they're having their new owner return for the harvest to collect the profits of the land. I mean, that's the context in which this parable is being told today. So when Jesus says, "And when vintage time came," or drew near, He sent His servants to the tenants to obtain their produce, I can only imagine that the crowds are leaning forward at this point. They're expecting Jesus to declare it's time for revolution. I mean, it's time to take back what is rightfully ours, because that's what a Messiah does, right? A Messiah is a warrior king calling the people to arms, right? So that's one side. Now you have another side, which is much smaller, but it's the high priests and the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leadership to whom this parable is directed. And let me tell you, they're hearing the story from a completely different point of view. You see, it's making them a bit nervous because they know full well that revolution, that's not a good thing, not for them. They have a very fragile relationship with Rome. Rome has allowed them to worship as they choose and to a large degree govern as they choose, as long as they do two things. Number one, keep the taxes flowing. All about the money, right? Keep the money coming and keep the peace. That's it. You do that, we're good. Okay, if not, we will replace you with people who will. Now keep in mind, long ago, the high priest position had been corrupted because it was appointed by Rome and sold out to the highest bidder. So consequently, the temple was controlled by very powerful families who profited greatly because of the relationship with Rome. So you can see how the last thing they want is revolution. So as Jesus starts to roll out this parable, you got one side, and they're getting all whipped up in a frenzy, and you got another side, and they're getting a little nervous. Jesus says, but the tenants seized the servants. One they beat, another they killed, and another they stoned. So you got people on one side going, yeah, that's right, you go get them. I mean, they got it coming to them, okay? Meanwhile, you have the other side, high priests and the scribes, and they're looking over their shoulders, seeing all the Roman soldiers, and they're going, oh my Yahweh, this is not a good thing. Jesus continues. Again, he sent other servants, more numerous than the first ones, but they treated them in the same way. And then the parable takes a strange turn, as often the parable of Jesus do, right? Finally, he sent his son, thinking, well, they'll respect my son. But the tenants saw the son. They said, this other one, he's the heir. Come, let us kill him and acquire his inheritance. They seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, they killed him, and then he asked, what will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes? Now, there's a lot here. Okay, it's time out. Let's just talk a couple things right off the bat. Okay, number one, when the landowner says they will respect my son, the Greek word for respect can also be used to suggest they will be shamed by my son. And we're going to get back to that shame in a little bit, okay? They'll be shamed into submission, okay? And we will come back to that. But number two, what kind of father would send his only son into a circumstance like that? I mean, given the fact that the previous servants had beaten, stoned, and killed the other servants, only a fool would risk his son in that way. But such is the foolish love of the Father for you and me. Another thing, how is it that these people would think that killing the heir would revert the land to them in the first place? I mean, that would be an interesting legal maneuver. I mean, I guess a case could be made in the ancient world. It is true that if land is abandoned, they could claim it as their own. But did they really think that the father who had his son killed for the sake of the land was just going to abandon it? I mean, what were these crazy people thinking? But anyway, back to the parable. Remember now, a parable, a simple story to illustrate a larger spiritual point. And trust me, a point is coming. This is Daily Living. I'm Father Chapin. You stick around. We'll be right back, and we will continue to talk about this amazing gospel that comes to us here as we consider God's Word and how we might be able to apply it into our daily living. Hi, this is Father Chapin, host of Daily Living with Father Chapin. It is such a pleasure to be able to come into your home each and every week and share the good news. But it's a bit expensive. So at the end of the broadcast, we're rolling out a new program of partnership. I'd ask you to grab a piece of paper and a pencil so that maybe you can jot it down and consider it. But what do you say we just get right on back to the show? Welcome back to Daily Living. Now, just for the break, we have Jesus. He's in the temple. He's addressing the religious leadership of Israel, and he's telling this parable about this vineyard and how the landowner is sending his servants to collect the produce, and they are abusing these servants. They're beating these servants. They're killing these servants. And then Jesus asks the question, what will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes? I mean, that is the question. Now, remember, the crowd is divided. The vast majority of people that are in the temple listening to this, of course, I'm talking about the crowds, the common folk, they'd be thinking, well, bring it on. Bring your soldiers. We'll fight them. We're going to reclaim what is rightly ours. Let the revolution begin. Meanwhile, you have the religious leadership on the other side. They're going, oh, no, don't do that. Remember now, Rome had a garrison of soldiers actually built into the wall. Their headquarters were in the walls of the temple. It's Passover, so they got more soldiers than normal, and they're looking down at the unrest, and this is not a good situation. So with that background, the high priest and the elders respond. They answered him. They will put those wretched men to a wretched death and lease his vineyards to others who will give him the produce at the proper times. So you can see the line's been drawn here. Both sides have kind of separated, and you can just feel the tension, the standoff. It's what's going to happen. I mean, on one side you have the crowds, and they're whipped up into a frenzy, revolution. On the other side, you have the high priest and the elders going, oh no, let's not do that. Meanwhile, you got the Roman garrison keeping an eye on the whole affair, and Jesus is in the middle. So here's the moment. Will Jesus call for a revolution? Will the soldiers move in to disperse the crowds to quell the revolution before it even begins? Or will the high priests and the elders and the scribes put the kibosh on the whole thing as they threaten anyone who challenges the owner of the vineyard with a wretched death? I mean, that's the standoff. That's what's going on. In the midst of all this tension, Jesus turns to the high priests and says, did you never read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord this has been done. It is wonderful in our eyes. That's Psalm 118, by the way. And let me tell you, people are like, what did he just say? Nobody understands what he's talking about. We have this tension rising to a degree of almost punches being thrown, and Jesus says this. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord this has been done, and it's wonderful in our eyes. And they're thinking, what? I mean, they're getting ready for a fight. The lines have been drawn, and everybody's there, and all of a sudden he says this, cornerstone, rejected, wonderful in our eyes. It reminds me of probably how Stormy looks at me when she doesn't understand. Stormy kind of like cocks her head like this and what? What are you doing? I mean, they're confused. Nobody understands him. Nobody gets him. In the middle of the confusion, he turns to the religious leadership and says, you are the wicked tenants. And the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to people who will produce its fruit. So there you have it. Jesus enters Jerusalem knowing that the end is near, right? He's been telling his disciples for some time that he's going to have to go to Jerusalem, be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, put to death. Okay, so here he is. The time has come. And somehow, by the Lord, this has been done. In other words, this is God's will, and it's wonderful in our eyes. Let us rejoice and be glad. I mean, really? I mean, what can we learn from this strange parable? This story that has caused so much confusion throughout the centuries. Of course, many have suggested in the past that the wicked tenants were the Jews and they've been kicked out, and now the tenants are the present church. This, of course, has fueled great anti-Semitic feelings, and it's ridiculous. Okay, but let's leave that question, put it on the shelf. We'll come back to it, okay? I want to talk about this landowner. Who is this guy sending his only son into the vineyard to be killed? And why was it his will? And why is this wonderful in our eyes? I mean, that's the question I want to talk about. I mean, because that's not our world, people. No. We live in a world where those wicked tenants would have been put to the sword without mercy. But God so loved the world that he gave his only son, so that he who believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So getting back to the question, who the wicked tenants? I'll tell you who the wicked tenants are. We are the wicked tenants. I've heard it said, and I believe it's true. Man left to himself murders his maker. And you don't have to look too far to see that that is true. We live in a world that is actively trying to take "In God We Trust" off our currency. We live in a world that has already made prayer in schools illegal. We live in a world that removes the Ten Commandments from our courthouses. We live in a world that wants to remove and erase its history, whether that history be good, bad, or indifferent. We want to create our own history, a new history. Look, there's the heir. Let us kill him. We live in a world that wants to kill the notion that our vineyard was created by loving God. My friends, the book of Revelation warns these early churches that existed in the day of Jesus. Where are they today? They've all been erased by history. They did not do the will of the Father, and they bore no fruit, and they disappeared. May I suggest to you, my friends, that is what is happening today. We live in a world where faith is eroding every day. Churches are becoming art studios and restaurants. Where's the fruit, my friend? Who killed Jesus? Yeah, through the years, many people blame the nation of Israel. But if we're honest with ourselves and have a real honest conversation, we kill Jesus just a little bit every day, don't we? Rembrandt has a famous painting of the crucifixion. And if you look carefully at the faces of those doing the killing, you will find a self-portrait of Rembrandt among them. Man left to himself will murder his maker. If we accept the fact that we are the wicked tenants, that we rebel against God every day, what is our hope? Well, our hope is that the stone which the builder rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord this has been done. It is wonderful in our eyes. That, my friend, is what the cross is all about. Jesus came to our vineyard to save us from ourselves. Not that we can get what we deserve, but rather to avoid what we deserve and get what we can never possibly deserve. Now remember that Greek word that could mean respect or shame? I told you we'd come back to it. The consequence of shame can be one of two things. It can either lead to change, repentance, or violence. Consider the cross. Let us recognize that we are in fact the wicked tenants. Let us locate our shame and let us understand that Jesus took that shame and nailed it to a cross. Once upon a time, there was a man named George Wilson, and he robbed a mail train, a mail carrier, federal crime, a crime in which he received the death penalty. But Andrew Jackson, who was the president at the time, commuted Mr. Wilson's sentence. But George Wilson refused the pardon. He would not explain why, he just declined. This, of course, created a legal conundrum that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And Chief Justice John Marshall wrote, "A pardon is an act of grace, but delivery is not complete without acceptance. It may be rejected by the person to whom it is tendered, and we have no power as a court to force it on him." And George Wilson was executed. Yeah, I guess George Wilson met his maker that day. And there's going to be a day when you and I stand in judgment as we meet our maker. And Jesus talks about this day of judgment. And how the lambs will go to his right and the goats will go to his left. How the wheat will be separated from the chaff. And you know what the difference is between the sheep and the goats? You know what the difference is between the wheat and the chaff? It's what you do with the cross, my friend. Will that cross lead to repentance, change in your life? Or will it lead to rejection? That's the question. The pardon has been given. Only question that remains is, will you accept it? You know, every day in this country, somebody does something nice for somebody else. Today, why don't you let that somebody be you? This is Daily Living. I'm Father Chapin. Hope you can come back next week and we'll do it again. Until then, I hope you let God live in your life. And I bless you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Hi, this is Father Chapin, host of Daily Living with Father Chapin. Want to thank you for watching the broadcast. I thought I might want to share with you the miracle of daily living, and it is a miracle. Daily Living began about 10 years ago as a radio show on a small AM station in Beckley, West Virginia. Probably powered by 2 AA batteries, I could have probably reached more people yelling out the window of the rectory. But it morphed into a TV show on one station, reaching about 200,000 households in southern West Virginia. Today, it reaches over 51 million households across this country. I get letters every day from people as far away as Hawaii, Massachusetts, Nevada, Arizona, Louisiana, Florida, North Carolina. And the theme that seems to arise from the program letters is that people feel that they're learning something, that it means something to them. They're being fed. And so they want to help keep this show on the air. Our show is 100% funded from private donations, such as viewers like yourself. If you would like to consider a Daily Living partnership, I would ask you to consider a monthly gift of whatever amount to Daily Living, 181 St. Brendan Way, Elkins, West Virginia, 26241, or go online at mydailyliving.com, tax deductible, of course. And I will send you a script of the show if you provide me an email, a monthly newsletter, as well as a small gift of appreciation. And together, we can continue to take the good news to a lost world. Once again, thank you for watching the broadcast.